So again, I'm just going to read the bio on Grace's website because I'm not very original. Grace P. Fong is a Chinese-American author-illustrator whose writing and artwork has appeared in Uncanny Magazine, Apex Magazine, Tor.com, Strange Horizons, and others. Her writing has won an award from FIA and LeVar Burton's Reads short fiction contest. It was for Girl Oil, I believe.
Yes, that was for Girl Oil.
Wow, I did my research. And her art has been nominated 4 times for the Best Fan Artist Hugo Award and won the inaugural Ignite Award in 2020 for Best Artist. In addition, she has worked as a narrative designer in tabletop trading card games and video games. I'm not going to ask for accuracy because I just stole it from her website. Anyway. Oh, wow, okay, great. So, since I work for Uncanny Magazine, I kind of wanted to start off the conversation with your story for Want of Milk, issue 43 in Uncanny Magazine. But it's also kind of unique because it has your cover art on there. And I guess, okay. So the first off, was that your debut short story?
Yes, that was the first short story that I ever published. And I was like, I asked Lynn and Michael, hey, could I also kind of like maybe do the cover for this? And so it was a really awesome experience to kind of be able to debut with like both aspects of what I do.
So, like, okay, were you actually working on the cover art and writing the short story at the same time, which to me seems ridiculous and multi-talented, but...
No, so I'd actually written that story, like, you know how long pub takes, right? So I'd written that story a long time before, and when I finally got it published, I was like, oh, then that is when I asked Lynn and Michael for the opportunity to get that, to like give an uncanny cover. Because I'd always seen a lot of their covers, like the work by Galen Dara, Nyla Magruder. A lot of their stuff is just so awesome. And I'm really thankful that they gave me, that they allowed me to present my own work that way.
So let's see, how did you approach then the cover art of your own story? Like, were other considerations were different than like conceptually the story, or?
I guess it's kind of like, well, because I'd written that story so far in advance of actually doing that image, I did not insert a lot of hooks for myself. So it was a little bit of a trial and error process. You do a bunch of sketches to kind of see which themes are going to work. And it also has to match a lot of the requirements for an uncanny cover. So it has to also like work for the other stories in the magazine in tone, in color style. And so I was looking at a lot of the covers that had come before. And so part of the process is, for me, I've also done covers for Strange Horizons, and a bunch of like other separate anthologies, and like Glitter and Ashes from Neon Hemlock or Silk and Steel, or not the cover, but some promo art. And part of that is trying to distill the narrative into a visual image. So I'll read through the work and look for repeated motifs. So in my own story, I know what I put in there. Like, there's a lot of motifs of like cows and milk and cheese and poisonous flowers. And so when I was, and there's also like a specific tree where things occur in the story. And so these are elements that I am taking and trying to position around the page when drawing the picture in such a way that I'm selling the mood and tone of the story as well as the mood and tone of Uncanny Magazine.
Did you ever get the point where artist you was kind of questioning writer you about why you made a certain choice that you had to like convey in picture or something like that, or?
Oh yeah, all the time. Whoever does like whether it's like the writer questioning the artist version of me or the artist questioning the writer, it's like whoever did the first thing, the second person is angry at.
I mean, are you interested in talking about this, like the subject matter of For Want of Milk? Cause
yeah, if you guys don't mind spoilers, it's been out for over a year.
Issue 43 Uncanny. If you go to the Uncanny website, you can just look for the story, because well, my interpretation is kind of like the American West during like the Chinese Exclusion Act time
Yes,
period.
shortly
so,
after.
yeah.
It's specifically set in 1880s Nebraska, shortly after the Chinese Exclusion Act. So there is some implication that the main character, Pearl, her father is of Chinese descent, and he was relocated back to China. And so it kind of factors into Pearl's experience, although the story isn't specifically about her Chinese American experience. It's about what it's like to live as an outsider, and specifically choosing to abandon like what is seen as society as like conventional, to kind of carve your own path, which I think is really which taps into the mythology of the American Wild West in contrast to the actual reality of it.
Is it a theme that you wanted to revisit in the future, like that time period, or is it?
Probably. I mean, I do love the Wild West. I've done like a lot of road trips through the American Southwest. I lived in Los Angeles. A lot of recurring themes that I find myself going back to are dealing with the idea of the mythologizing of America, whether that's Wild West or whether that is via film and media and Hollywood. And like, I love the contrast of how we perceive ourselves and how we present ourselves versus the reality of how much effort has to go into constructing these images.
Yeah, that's a great segue actually to the other stories you've written, right? Like, I mean, I'm specifically thinking of Girl Oil, right? That it's, I don't want to try to summarize it because then that's your story and I'm probably going to completely mess it up. But so,
I'm not gonna lie, I cross my fingers every time that somebody will write the summary so I can copy paste it and put it on my website.
I see. So you're saying I failed in this regard. And yeah. That's fair. That's great. How would I summarize it? Asian American woman basically struggling in Hollywood, right? And finds like an oil that would make her, I don't know how to put this delicately or not, fit basically a more white beauty standard. But I also find it interesting because it's like there's also another character, like somebody who's kind of a friend but kind of a competitor, almost best frenemy, anyway, type of thing, which I thought was kind of interesting because like in a weird way that other character is also having their own character arc and has a very like nuanced kind of take about this kind of weird competition these two women are having, but not really because it's really about, you know, the beauty standards of the industry. I don't know if you wanted to talk more about that.
I mean, I can speak to that. Yeah. So originally I wrote it from Michelle, the main character. She's Asian American, from her perspective. And I actually wrote this story prior to writing For Want of Milk. For Want of Milk was a much more direct process, and like I was able to bang that out in like a week. But this one I actually like went back and forth on with a lot of editors for or like critique partners for years, actually, to try and build Girl Oil out. And basically, there's a very clear bad guy in For Want of Milk, so that was made a much easier story. But when building out Girl Oil, there is the bad guy is actually just more like the standards. So I felt like I had to build out her competitor character to be kind of a different side of the same coin. So it's not the Asian American experience of the Asian American who was born in the United States, but rather the one of the immigrant, the person who's coming over, who has a lot to lose, and how the beauty standards that Hollywood imposes, especially on Asian people, can be like made or broken or fallen into, and how it's a story essentially of both of them, of how they choose to survive this kind of hostile environment.
Because I want to keep talking about it, but I'm ending up spoiling the story, so I don't know if I want to talk about the end.
It's been out for a year.
So, okay. because like near the end there is this point where the main character kind of forgives her best frenemy. Let's pretend I just said that right.
It's a difficult word.
Yeah. Which I thought was a very interesting, not forgive, I don't know if forgive is a right, or more like understand where she's coming from, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, it's a story about being jealous of the friends that you have. And so you put up your own walls. And so that's her taking the wall down to be like, it's an understanding of her part because she starts to see how other people have the choice. She starts to understand that the choices that other people make are how they are also surviving. It may not be the way how the main character chooses to do it. And so she has to find a way for herself that makes her feel satisfied. But she's like, I understand where you're coming from. I want to help you.
So when I was trying to research for this interview, and then you ended up publishing another story just a couple days ago, I think, it was...
Literally Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right. I have no control of this.
Just giving me more homework to do, which is kind of hilarious. But it's also, it has the similar themes of Hollywood and the pressures of appearance in Hollywood. So it's just interesting that you have two stories that kind of follow the similar scene, although the setting is slightly different. It's like in the 1930s.
Yeah, this one is the 1940s Hollywood, and it's influenced by a lot of the themes that were happening in there, aka the mythologizing of the United States at that point. And because, after winning World War II, the U.S. was able to do that. And so when writing that story, I had already been published. I was much more established. So at that point, I was working more and more visual metaphor into it. And so, so that one, I'm just doing a piece for it because I feel like it. And, it's nice to have hobbies. So I'm actually being able to draw more more visuals out of that, because being a narrative designer, being an artist, being a writer, you kind of realize that they're all the same thing. That you're just speaking multiple languages and telling stories in multiple languages, whether they're visual languages or whether they're verbal languages. And the 1940s the 1940s stories analyzes how that kind of message and story is crafted behind the scenes.
So, let's see. I had a question now, I can't remember. Oh my gosh. I really want to keep on talking about writing, but you're the artist guest of honor, so I feel like we should segue to the art section kind of thing. So, I think you told me on email that it was anime that got you into art.
Yes, I don't hide that anymore. I used to be really embarrassed by it, but...
Yeah, I don't understand, I am embarrassed watching anime moments too, and I don't know what that's all about, so.
I think it's because, when you're a kid, right, you're like, I want to be just like the other kids. I want to have things to talk about with the other kids. And then you realize that none of your classmates have watched Sailor Moon because your classmates don't have parents who are going to the Chinese bootlegger and getting these VHSs from Japan that they don't even understand because they haven't even been dubbed or subbed, and they're just sticking cartoons in front of you. But when you're 8, that doesn't matter. You're just like, this is cool.
I find it interesting, nowadays, it's actually kind of outpacing, manga has outpaced American comics in a lot of ways, and it's just kind of weird to grow up to see a flip in that regard. So what was it about anime that drew you to it that then influenced your art?
Growing up in the 90s, I just didn't connect to the art style of what a lot of the cartoons that were available at that time. Thinking Ren and Stimpy, Beavis and Butthead. I literally just thought that they were really unattractive. So and when you're 6, you just want to go to the thing that looks cool. And so with Naoko Takeuchi's Sailor Moon in particular, you have these super elegant, super fashionable super soldiers essentially that are dating fantasy princes, grand romance. It's not these episodes, this episodic story of here's the joke of the week. And so I found myself getting really invested in these longer term stories, and I would draw the characters. I would come up with my own fan fiction. I had my own fan Sailor Scout. And like this.
Which planet? Was
What?
What was your fan, like which planet or asteroid? body?
Sirius, the dog star, because I super wanted a Shiba Inu, and now as an adult, I realize they're basically cats, but in dog form that you have to take outside to poop.
Wait, don't you own a cat? You own a cat though, so.
Yeah, but she poops in a box.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Recently, I had to take care of my partner's mom's papillon, and it just keeps pooping in my office. So, I don't know why.
That's why the
I don't know why I told
box
you that.
is great.
Yeah, so yeah. You can train them to poop outside, right? Can't you? Or not with Shiba Inus? They don't just poop everywhere. Why are we
No.
talking about poop? I don't know why. Sorry about this. I apologize. I don't know. I just wanted to publicly complain about my partner's mom's dog, so I apologize.
I'm sure they're really cute.
Let me see. So does anime continue to influence you? Like the current anime, is there a favorite anime?
Yeah, because like, I mean, in college I was doing a lot of anime cons, and that's actually how I got started as an artist. Is actually by drawing a lot of this anime fan art, and that was a way that I could build my skills as a renderer, as like a painter, because a lot of the design work is done already for you. These characters are incredibly recognizable. A lot of the color schemes have already been picked out. So you can train a lot of technical skills by doing fan art pieces. And it's really great because when you do fan art stuff, you automatically connect with other fans. After all, this is what Norwescon is about, right? Is meeting other fans. And so like, if I would draw Zuko from Avatar, then other people who were fans of Zuko would come and talk to me about the coolest villain from
Yeah,
Avatar.
Why is it always Zuko? I know
It's because he's handsome and tragic. Come
right,
on.
right. It's the scar. Okay. The moping is the moping. That's all.
I didn't like it when he had the top knot,
yeah,
but then
it's
he like cut it off, and I was like, oh damn.
No, I'm a big Zuko fan, so I don't know why I'm making fun of you. Really making fun of myself. But any thoughts about like, because like current anime kind of heavily leans on like 3D animation, which kind of changes the motion and the look of it. I mean, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I don't know if you have a particular opinion about that kind of change from traditional drawn anime.
So working as a professional artist in the 3D animation field, I've worked on DreamWorks movies like Kung Fu Panda 2, The Croods, Puss in Boots. I was a 3D, I was assistant to a lot of 3D animators. And 3D technology, because it's closer to puppetry than individual frame drawing, it can be more efficient in terms of just money spent versus time spent to create the same amount of footage. And so I just see 3D as another tool. And so like, I feel that I feel that it's only happened recently where the 3D used in anime has really like finally fit into that 2D look. In particular, I'm thinking about BlazBlue and the recent video game stuff. Like, there was this moment at EVO where, or I don't know if it was EVO, but one of the companies was showing off their new game engine, and it looked like it was 2D, but then all of a sudden the frame freezes and the camera starts panning around the two fighters, and it's just mind-blowing because all of a sudden the anime is like 3D. I think we're really lucky that we live in a space where the tools are finally capable of breaching that 2D, 3D gap. So now we can focus more on the storytelling and the audience and what kind of creative work we're doing.
So you have worked in 3D in
Yes.
video game studios. Is that like, do you have a preference in terms of the kind of medium, in terms of?
I don't have a particularly strong preference. Like, there's tons of 3D movies that I've cried at, and there's tons of 2D movies that I've also cried at. Okay, maybe I cry a lot at movies, but
Yeah, I'm a crier too. Yes.
I mean, especially in the United States, like so much of the work that Pixar has done, I made the mistake of wearing eyeliner to a Pixar film. I feel that like both present different challenges in terms of time and creation. It's just a matter of which of those challenges is within your budget and going to drive you less to frustration.
I don't know why like artists and writers have like, we have like a frustration-based economy. It feels like, right? Like, I don't know. Okay, let's see here. I mean, I don't know if you wanted to like talk about, I think you mentioned you sometimes talk about advising like it for beginning artists or continuing artists, like education, formal or otherwise, or if you have, I have mixed feelings about these kinds of questions because every artist has a completely different story about how they came to their craft, and you know, and every artist has to find their own like answer. But I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I didn't come to art through like art school or like formal, like, you know, I'm going to be a professional artist. My educator was the internet, for good and for bad. So I was always drawing as a kid, and my parents let me, you know, enroll in like extracurricular art classes. But when I was about in high school, they were like, time to get serious. Very common amongst Asian Americans. They're like, you need to learn a STEM field so that you can get a job and pay your bills and buy a house and insert number of financial goals. And, so a lot of how I learned is I worked as a programmer for 10 years, and I would spend what I earned on taking art classes with a lot of the professionals that were working in the animation field at that time. I was lucky enough to live in Los Angeles, so there were a lot of small schools that were run by people working in the industry. Concept Design Academy, Brainstorm School. I never took classes at Noman, but that's another one. And so basically I was working during the day as well as going to class at night, doing my homework on the weekends, and practicing. And so that was kind of how I built myself up as an artist. So I came to art later than people who, you know, went to art school when they were 18.
So do you have any advice for somebody like starting off? It's like if somebody came up to you and like, hey, I want to be an artist, like, you just tell them no, don't do it. It's too difficult. There's no money in it. Or
No, like the thing is, the advice that I would tell people is consider whether or not you want it to be your career, and whether, like, because once you have it, once something has to also pay your bills rather than just bring you enjoyment, it also has to hit deadlines. And so eventually you have to basically practice enough to get consistent to the point where you can meet your clients' needs. And that's a kind of lifestyle that isn't always great. Basically, now that I work for longer hours than I did then, because I've advanced in my other careers, I have to budget how much client work I take on, because I don't have the time to literally commit to these deadlines. I don't want to be like that flaky, terrible person that they're working with. And so sometimes, you also gotta like keep a little bit of enjoyment for yourself. Otherwise, if you just keep doing a lot of professional work, you can potentially lose that line between who you are and who your client wants you to be. Because a lot of times when you are selling stuff, there is a desire for consistency. You don't want to go walk into a grocery store, ask for an apple, and receive an orange, right? Technically, it's also a fruit, but you paid for an apple. So clients will often have certain expectations based off of your established portfolio. And so in order to have time to experiment and time to make mistakes, because you don't want to hand your client a rotten apple either, you have to find and budget time for that. And so basically, for new artists, I would suggest try to think of skills that are not necessarily just the drawing, but think about your time management skills and try and hone those, and your balancing skills, and your ability to say yes and no to specific people so that you can maintain boundaries for yourself.
yeah, have you had that dreaded "no, I'm not the right artist for you" kind of conversation with a client before? Have you had that dreaded like "no, I'm not the right artist for you" like to a client before? And
Yeah, it gets a lot easier as you have more experience and you know what you're good at and what you're not good at. You have to like try a lot of things. Like, I'm terrible at painting spaceships, so if somebody's like, "Can you paint a spaceship?" I'm like, "I'm sorry. Please go talk to this person instead." But talk to this person is the key here. When you are a new artist, the people that you are working with and drawing with are your peers. These are your friends. They will improve as you improve. And eventually you'll build a community. And part of community is helping each other out. So when there's something that you can't take on, it's really, you can help your friend by being like, "I know this person who does have availability," or that other person. And community is actually how a lot of artistic jobs are like doled out.
Yeah, I've definitely passed like writing assignments to peers and friends, and when they succeed, like I have a tiny bit of jealousy, but then also I'm like, "Hey, I made them." I'm kidding, I'm joking. So anyway, so this is funny. It was really interesting trying to prepare for this interview because, like I said, you're like a triple threat. You've got writing, you've got art and narrative design. I'm really personally interested in asking more about narrative design, but also I think a lot of people don't know what narrative design is. I don't know if you want to try to define it, or at least define it for yourself.
I don't even know if a lot of narrative designers know what narrative design is, but narrative design is, I guess, my definition would be like, narrative design is the storytelling experience of going through a game. So, having worked in multiple mediums, essentially I've tried to abstract out what is the creative experience. Because there's actually a lot of similarities between art, writing, and video games. Is you're taking a viewer through an emotional journey. Whether it's via prose, words that they read on a page, whether it's their eye moving around a painting, or whether it's them clicking buttons on a controller. And so narrative design is essentially writing where you don't have words. So you look at, instead, story structure. You're looking at beats. You're looking through experiences that you want to put the player through to give them that emotional arc, that emotional satisfaction. So we do a lot of outlines, a lot of beat sheets, and most of the writing is conveyed via dialogue. So there's a lot of focus on character and a lot of focus actually on what characters look like. Because a lot of what's going to be conveyed to the player is not going to be through them reading a sentence. It's going to be about them looking at a character, walking around a map. So my specialty is environmental storytelling when it comes to video games. And so basically what I do is I use my visual background to be like, "Hey, put a giant whale skeleton here," because that way when a player goes in here, they'll suddenly be asking themselves, where did this whale skeleton comes from? And then as they go further, maybe they'll find like other fossils, maybe they'll find the ruins of an ancient city of Atlantis. So you're actually telling the story of this abandoned underwater world without mentioning a single word. It's all communicated through the art.
Yeah, I've been playing this video game called Dredge, and there is literally a whale skeleton that, like, I spent all this time piloting my boat around in a circle, like looking for stuff to do around it. So, but
giant fauna is just really cool. I'm not the only person who likes it.
let me see here. I think I've just been firing questions at you nonstop. I think we were a little bit ahead of schedule. I think you told me that you have a cat story.
Yes.
That I would love to ask because A, it's a cat, and B, I'm stalling for time until we get to Q&A.
I did tell you that this was the story you could ask me for if you needed to stall for time. So, I have a cat. I love her. Her name is Poutine, like the food. And,
I mean, just because you like poutine or that your cat got into poutine, is there like a...
That's what the story is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh.
So, I was young and naive, and I was living in Los Angeles, and I don't know if any of you have lived in LA, but dating there is terrible. So, I went to E3 because some industry stuff, met up with a friend there, and I was like, oh my God, your coworker is really cute. Could you, like, do you want to hang out? Bring him along, and then, like, I want to try and get to know him better. And my friend, bless his soul, was like, yeah, sure. But they were in the middle of crunch. So we had to drive down from the Burbank area all the way down to Irvine, which, if you're not from LA, that doesn't make any sense. But on a Tuesday night, that is a 2-hour drive. I, in my foolishness, decided to, and bless her heart too, my roommate was like, yeah, sure, I'm gonna come. So me and my roommate drive 2 hours to this place, and because my friend and his coworker are both Canadian, we decide let's get poutine. There are only 2 poutine restaurants in like all of LA, by the way. And the thing is, my friend shows up, but his coworker does not. And I'm like, well, at least I got food. But while we're hanging out in the parking lot, chilling, talking to each other, my roommate is like, hey, look, a cat. She's obsessed with cats. Like, at that time, I thought I wanted a dog. But she's like, I'm going to go talk to it. And I'm still talking to my friend. And I'm like, it's a street cat. It's going to run away. And then all of a sudden, she comes up and she is holding a tiny kitten. I mean, we couldn't, like, put it back. So we got this blanket that was out of her car, wrapped the kitten up, and took it and drove it an hour north to where we lived. And it's 2 hours with traffic after work and then 1 hour back, for the record. Los Angeles feelings. And we just, you know, put her in the bathroom for a night, and then we took her to the rescue the day afterwards. We kind of may have lied and said, yeah, we totally found her behind the grocery store here, so we don't have to drive an hour back to Irvine and give her to the adoption people there. But in the car ride, she was very cute, very quiet, very nice, and we were kind of ping-ponging potential names back and forth, and we decided to name her Poutine after what we ate for dinner that night. And basically, 6 weeks passed. While the shelter was cleaning her up, she obviously had worms, and eventually she showed back up on the website, and it was free adoption weekend. And I was like, well, I feel this is the universe telling me to give up on men in Los Angeles. And so I went and adopted this cat. And now she is happy and 8 years old, and also helped me get a job in Canada.
Wait, how did that happen?
Well, a recruiter found me on LinkedIn and was like, oh, what do you think about this gig in Vancouver? And I was like, I love Canada. My cat's name is Poutine. And he was like, okay, have an interview.
Is this the same cat that's like in your bio picture?
Yes, that's her.
Does your cat actually answer to Poutine, or or is it a cat and it completely ignores you?
No, she answers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She answers to Poutine as well as Poot Poot. So if you talk about the Pokemon Hoot Hoot, she kind of looks around at you. And then you have to reward her for looking.
So I've honestly blown through every question I have on my cards. So I guess we can open it up to Q&A. And if anybody has any questions, the person up here?
Yes, so as part of like trying to, or wait, I should repeat the question. Yeah, so at opening ceremonies, I mentioned that I was doing a picture for the recent short story that came out on Tuesday. It's called The Toll of the Snake. And so this is part of what I mentioned about carving time out for yourself to experiment. So given that a lot of, I wanted to move back into traditional mediums, because when you work 8 hours a day in front of a computer screen, after dinner, your eyes are just falling out of your head. So I wanted to move back to pencils and papers and things that don't shoot light into my eyeballs all evening. So I'm using this story that I published as the basis of starting a new piece. And during the talk that I'm giving at 1, I will be walking through the initial steps of how I'm doing this planning. Obviously, the piece isn't done because life's hard. And so I'm using a lot of the visuals of the 1940s, of that specific Medusa and Whitesnake character, to make decisions about how I want this picture to look like. I don't know if that answers your question.
Any other questions? Did I ask your favorite current anime, or did I already ask your favorite current anime that you're watching? Or?
No, you've not. So I haven't actually watched anime for the past couple of years because lockdown was a weird time. However, my partner and I have decided to go through a bunch of anime-inspired video games, and I've asked him to play through all of FromSoft's repertoire for me. So recently we've been playing Demon Souls and Dark Souls, and I really like these games because they have a particular aesthetic that is like, screw being anatomically correct. Everything is a freaky undead monster, even you. And so, like, I really like Japanese games and stuff because they're a lot more about storytelling via aesthetic rather than trying to maintain a level of particular realism. And like, they're not about convincing you that the visuals of the video game world it's just like real life. It's like stepping into this fictionalized version of Seattle or Los Angeles. They're just like, screw it, this looks cool. And I really like the FromSoft games because a lot of them take that aesthetic and are inspired by worlds that have been corrupted based off of the actions of people that came before you. And how you, as a character that can always die and be reborn, are undead or like a soul or something like that, and how you are meant to shepherd in a new age, and how each of the factions has its own different visual signature, and how you have a choice to align with these factions and like bring in a new age for them. Elden Ring is absolutely fantastic for this.
I haven't had a chance to take a look at it. Is there like a video game property that you would really want to like narrative design or art for? What the heck am I saying?
Art for, like, I mean, for sure the FromSoft would be like, the FromSoft games are definitely like an art peak goal for me. I love their dark aesthetic. I love how weird it is. And it's very interesting because like if you read the interviews by the art directors there, they're like, it can't just be a zombie. It has to be a beautiful zombie. And you have to like show the effect of the narrative on the zombie. Like these are hollow zombies, so they have a specific look. They all look shriveled and muscular, and they're really pink. Because it's hollow means that all of like their souls and all of the things that made them human, like their conscious thought processes have left them, and they're nothing but muscle and bone, and they attack you now. Yeah, like it's all about that visual storytelling. But the game format I really like mysteries, because I have terrible reflexes. That's why I'm making my partner, who's 30% faster than me, play through all these FromSoft games. But so I like games where I can go through and investigate all these little corners. So one of the games that I really like, peak narrative design if you ask me, is the Nonary games from Spike Chunsoft. These are really old at this point, but essentially you have a series of 9 characters, and you end up learning a lot about these characters and investigating their pasts, and eventually you find the links between all of them. And so I would love to work on a game where that's basically the mechanic is investigation.
Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, I'll just keep asking anime and video game questions. So, I don't know if anybody wants to hear that from me. Yeah.
I mean, I also do read like sci-fi fantasy stuff.
Yeah, but I want to talk about anime. No, I'm kidding. Favorite, yeah, you got a favorite sci-fi or fantasy story or book or thing?
I think if you asked me that question when I was like younger and like as an adult, that answer would change. The stories, I like to read a lot of short fiction because, you know, when you have to commute and when you don't have, as an adult, when you don't have a lot of time, these stories can be very impactful very quickly. And there are two stories that have made me actually cry, one of which I read at work, which was a stupid idea. I think it's the Paper Menagerie, right? I think that's the name of it. And it's a story about how a mother folds origami for her child and the relationship between them. And that is something that I could not have understood if I was a teenager reading this. This is something that is tapping into who I am now as an adult. Same thing with Welcome to Your Authentic Indian Experience. Another story that basically made me cry. Luckily, I was at home when I read that one. But when I was a kid, I was all about reading things that were aspirational, things that gave me like heroes to look up to. So I was a still am actually, Tamora Pierce fan. Like, she was my introduction into science fiction, into fantasy, and so I was drawing characters from Sailor Moon in the world of Tamora Pierce. And that was how I kind of started on this creative art writing kind of path. And like, because I thought Alana was super fucking cool. Like, I didn't really identify with the other girls my age at that time. I had a lot of friends who were guys. Like, mostly it's a video game thing. So I was really into Pokemon. And so I kind of saw myself as more being aligned on that masculine spectrum of what was considered a masculine interest at that time. So the idea of a girl masquerading as a guy was super, and being accepted as thus, was really appealing to me in the 90s. And obviously Dane with her animals was super cool. I only had fish growing up, so the idea of a pet that actually loved me back was super aspirational as well.
Something like a pet theme going on in our conversation here, so.
Okay, so my other cheat is that whenever I write a character, I just kind of pick an animal and just download all the metaphors for that animal into that character, and I'm like, aha, he's clever, like a fox. He has red hair, like a fox. This is just judging me now.
No, I'm actually trying to think of how I can steal that without anybody realizing that I stole it. Maybe I shouldn't have admitted it. Again, I don't want to steal if anybody has any questions. So, it's okay. It's still early in the morning, at least for me. Like I don't wake up until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We could talk about your up-and-coming Uncanny story.
Yeah, we could. I will try to avoid spoilers, but yes, I do have a story coming out in Uncanny. I don't know when, but yeah.
I think this coming July-August issue, but don't hold me to it. I just assembled a magazine. I actually don't know the scheduling as well.
Like Lynn and Michael will know.
Yeah. What was the title? What was the title of it?
The title of that one is We Do Not Eat Much Fish. It has gone through 4 different titles until I finally found the one that worked.
What was the previous ones? I really want to know.
One of them was like, Hands of Men are Hands of Blood. And I was like, that's way too metal for this story.
Yeah, it's really metal. Wow, yeah.
One of them was like, the original name of it was Vampire Settlers of Catan. Clearly, for copyright reasons, I was not submitting on that one.
I don't even know how that would, because I read it before, for this interview. I don't know how you got that title. I shouldn't be making fun of you there. I'm trying to think of how to summarize it without spoiling it too, because again, I want people to go read the magazine when it comes out. But in title alone, obviously there's like a theme of like food, right? Because for one of milk, and then this one we don't eat much fish. But there's a bit also. I mean, there's a witchcraft going on, and then there's babies going on also in both stories. So I don't know if that's.
So the summary is essentially a woman lives alone on an island with her cursed child. And it's the story of how that relationship is disrupted by an outsider, and how that the presence of that outsider causes her to look inside at her own powers and magic and allow her to become something new than her continuing the things that society and her father and her husband had told her to do for this child. And vampires.
Wait, what was the last part?
Vampires.
Oh, vampires, right. But let's see. Because like, I don't want to ask this question because it gets kind of weirdly stereotypical, but like, a lot of like Chinese Americans will insert food, like all their stories, and food is so ridiculously important. But I don't know if that's a little.
No, it's totally cool. Food is a big part of my life. I don't drink alcohol, so a lot of food is my form of creativity that is never beholden to a client, and so that's really important to me. Basically, well, I guess my client is like my boyfriend who lives with me, but he has really low standards. It's great. So basically, food for me is a form of exploration and understanding other cultures and meeting people who also share the same food interests. And cooking for me is also a way of expressing love. Like my dad cooks huge meals whenever I come home as his way of saying welcome back. And it is definitely part of like an Asian experience is a lot of the emotions that are associated with food. And it's almost similar, in my opinion, to the Western experience of going to a bar and drinking alcohol or getting drinks with somebody. This is a way of, like, the consumption of food and alcohol has a lot of social meaning attached to it. And so because I don't drink, my way of doing it is through food and experimenting of combining like this sauce with that other thing and like trying to recreate memories and create new ones as well through various combinations of edible items.
I recently discovered that the reason why my dad's like fried eggs tasted so good is he was using sesame oil. And it took me only 5 years ago I suddenly realized it because I ran out of regular oil and I used sesame oil, and I'm like, this is exactly like my childhood.
There's also, speaking of eggs, which I actually really didn't like eggs until I tried like some in Australia that like came from like my buddy's backyard, and I was like, oh my god, these are mind-blowing. Because I thought they were like kind of bland and flavorless. But to my partner, eggs have a lot of meaning because it's something that his dad would always make for him growing up. It was very simple. And he has a very specific way of eating eggs. I'm sorry to put you on blast, but he has a runny yolk, and he cuts around the yolk, and he shoves the entire thing into his mouth. Just the whole yolk at once. And I thought this was really weird because I break the yolk open and use a carb to soak it up and eat the carb. But this is something that he does, his brother does, his dad does, and so it's kind of for him, the very act of eating the egg in that way connects him to his family. And so food, eating, gathering around food is all like, it's a very useful metaphor for a lot of our social activity and our needs as people.
So I think we have just run out of time. I think it's very Asian to end it on food. So I guess it's appropriate.
It's also lunch.
Oh my gosh, it's lunch. Yeah, thank you for letting me interview you. Thank you everybody. Thank you all of you for coming.
Thank you for coming.